Live from the East Memphis studios of KWAM, this is the Earl Farrell from Memphis Show. From humble beginnings in Odessa, Texas, he's been all over the Western Hemisphere, a radio and TV veteran, former restaurateur, and one-time male model. He's Earl Farrell, and he calls Memphis his home. This is the Earl Farrell from Memphis Show. And now, here's your host, Earl Farrell.
And thank you very much, and welcome back in. Ken Hull is with us. This is the Art Beat, and we've actually got some talent in the studio today.
I know. Huge change of pace for us.
It is. We're all sort of in shock, actually. I could tell when you walked in, there was an aura about you that said, they can play instruments and sing.
Well, you know, we so often bring on painters, and that just doesn't work on radio. So today we have musicians.
Yeah.
This is a great leap forward.
Well, introduce us to them.
I'd love to. So this weekend, we're about to have, starting tomorrow night, in fact, the ICEBERG ensemble of 10 New York-based composers with new music. Now, they're going to let them tell you about it. But in the studio today, representing the full crew, we've got Stephanie Ann Boyd. Thank you. Welcome for being here. Harry Stephalakis.
Oh, you got it.
Stephalakis?
Stephalakis.
That's $1.50 for all you owe me. Okay.
That's why I said introduce
I could lose
to
it
us.
right here. Alex Bertzos?
Yes, that's correct.
Close.
Bertzos.
Okay, I can go off the air now.
You can just call me Earl.
Earl. But he does spell it with an extra E, so keep that in mind. This is the second year that Blue Shift has brought ICEBERG in. So Blue Shift is the Memphis-based performance group, and ICEBERG is the ensemble of composers, if it were. How that works out, that's parsing it. And this, again, this year is in Crosstown, which we love. And this is great because, you know, somewhere after Mozart and Beethoven, the world didn't end, and we have contemporary classical and chamber composers doing all kinds of cool things. And I'd like for you all to tell us a little bit, what's your background? How did you get from being a normal human being like us to a composer?
They were born.
They were born. Okay. We have talent genes.
Well, for me, I started playing violin when I was 8 years old, and my grandmother was a composer, so I had to play along to her music. And so when I was in youth orchestra and falling in love with like Tchaikovsky and Samuel Barber, I realized that what was even cooler than playing violin in orchestra was writing my own orchestral music. So, and it's been downhill from there. No, yeah.
What a great legacy, generational.
It's
Good for you. Well done.
I guess kind of similarly, my grandfather was a clarinetist, a touring musician. He immigrated from Greece to Canada, to Montreal.
Yes.
Back in the 60s, and I grew up listening to him play clarinet as a child. My youngest memory, I think, from the age of 1 or 2, which is about when he died, is him playing the clarinet. And from then, I picked up the piano at the age of 4, played classical music for much of my childhood, and then I became a metal guitarist for many years, and songwriter and producer. And then in my 20s, I decided, you know what, let's do that Beethoven thing. So I became a classical composer, especially.
I think I saw in your notes that there's a synthesis sometimes of traditional Greek music and metal.
Yeah, the Greek music for sure coming from my Greek lineage, and the classical and the metal all kind of mixed in together. It's a strange smorgasbord.
I love that, though. Yeah. Okay. Alex?
Well, I think what's really valuable in what Harry said is, for composers now, there's not just one path to being a composer anymore.
Right.
People grow up playing and listening to all manner of different styles.
Right.
My first exposure to playing music was handbells and singing in the church choir. And then I picked up euphonium, like a small tuba, so I played in marching bands and high school band. And then I played rock and roll drums. And I didn't see any contradiction in that as a teenager. And I don't see any contradiction in that now as a working composer, bringing in influences from the jazz and rock and hip-hop worlds and using that in art music. And I think that democratization of style is something that was a founding principle of ICEBERG when we first organized in 2016. The idea that there shouldn't be just one correct aesthetic. That's not the right approach in the 21st century. Instead, you need to feel free to draw influence from anywhere and cross those genre boundaries that previously might have excluded certain individuals from participating in concert music.
You know, what's really interesting is what you're saying is absolutely true, and I think it's needed. In the old days, back in the 50s and 60s on radio, they played top 40. It didn't matter whether it was classical, if it made it to the top 40, if it was jazz, if it was country, if it was contemporary, R&B. So we grew up hearing all kinds of genres of music, and therefore we were exposed to it, and we found I loved big band sound. I loved classical. I didn't really like country back then. I like country now. Back then it was everybody living in a house trailer and dying of alcoholism. But I think that's good for our young people to be exposed to what you're doing, though. It's because they think it's all Mozart and Beethoven, and why would I want to play that? And so...
Well, I'm happy to hear you say that, and I agree. I think the future of art music is synthetic.
Right.
This idea of bringing together different traditions and presenting something that is not just classical or not just popular, but something in between. I think listeners armed with Spotify and iPads, they're less interested in what a piece of music is than what it does, whether it moves them or not.
As you really do cover all these different genres and influence, tell me, how does this affect the instrumentation for which you compose? What am I going to see out in there? Excuse me.
Well, the instrumentation that we're using for this concert, which is tomorrow night, Thursday night at 7 p.m. in Crosstown Concourse, is drawn from Blue Shift Ensemble's core.
Okay.
So we're going to be working with a collection of string players, piano, bassoon, and flute.
Okay.
But those cross-stylistic influences will still be there. And I think that in our body of work, not just for this concert, but in our catalogs, you'll see compositions that include electric guitar, that include electronic beats, that include hip-hop MCs for me. And again, I don't see any contradiction there.
That's great. Same thing for you guys? Do you like to compose for something? Hey, I've got to invent an instrument. I think of Stan Kenton and the mellophones. Hey, I've got to come up with a horn.
Sure. Personally, as a guitarist, of course, I'm particularly drawn to the instrument there, and especially extended range electric guitars that are common in contemporary progressive metal. So 8-string guitar, which has 2 extra lower strings that makes it that much lower, heavier, more brutal. And so then taking those ideas and those kinds of sonorities and transferring them into classical ensembles also works really well. So we're working with Blue Shift Ensemble where, for instance, they don't have a guitarist on board that I could use a piece like that. But with string quartet, I could make it sound like a metal band using certain extended techniques for the instrument and certain way of writing for violin and viola and cello.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And you're going all Gaelic on us.
For this piece, but also, my heritage is mostly Scottish, and so I've just found an affinity for those folk tunes or that sort of aesthetic. But for my music, it's mostly traditional instrumentation, but especially in my orchestral works, I do use a lot of extended techniques to emulate different sounds from nature, or just get something out of the sort of the masses that's sort of an interesting cumulative sound that audiences may not have heard before.
Oh, I love that. And you use a lovely phrase here in the press release about abstract sound sculptors. The idea that beyond a tone poem, we're really putting together a musical experience that may not be typical and linear in a lot of ways.
Well, part of our message, or what part of our mission as an organization, is to engage with listeners, and we are particularly interested in engaging with listeners who don't have a lot of experience with contemporary music. I think that a lot of listeners come into the musical exchange with one idea of what music should be, that it should be enjoyed, that it provides pleasure. But the truth is that there are a lot of different ways to listen to music. Music can manipulate the emotions. It can make you feel good, but it can also make you feel dread or suspicion or confusion. And that's not an inauthentic reaction. Even pieces that you don't like that's an authentic reaction to it. The music is provoking that. And additionally, there's not just one way to encounter music. It's not just coming into a darkened theater and sitting in an uncomfortable seat while people around you unwrap candies and cough. You can, as a composer, you can envelop a space in music. You can create an installation that people can go and interact with, and that's just as legitimate a way of experiencing music as the concert hall.
Okay.
We're going to experience some of the music
Yes.
right after the break. Stay with us. And once again, we'll say they're going to be at Crosstown this...
Starting tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night.
With the performance, and then Saturday with 2 lectures, right?
Correct.
We'll talk about that as we come back.
All right, so stay with us.
Great.
Hi, everybody. I'm Earl Farrell. We'll talk about all things Memphis weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 on KWAM The Voice. Now on FM 107.9 and AM 990. And welcome back. And
Here's a sample.
You were listening to a sample of ICEBERG new music. They're going to be at Crosstown Arts and Blues Shift Ensemble. That'll be tomorrow night, and then a lecture the following night. And then you're going to be also at the University of Memphis.
Got a lot going on.
Yeah.
Now, Harry, we opened with your piece. Was that part of the aftermath? Was that what we just heard?
No, that's Calibrating Friction. That's another piece, but it kind of represents my style a little bit.
Okay. So we hear a lot of instruments, clearly more contemporary. I'm almost going a little Beatles there for a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
Which
Sure.
Not a bad
I'll
thing.
take that.
White
Why
Album,
not?
not a bad thing. Okay. So clearly fun and accessible. That's awesome. And then we've got queued up a piece of Stephanie Ann's. Jessica, can we get a bite of that? Is that Imogen?
Imogen.
Imogen.
Yeah, for flute and
I had
piano.
a 50-50 chance.
You did.
I did well on the names, though. I feel good about that. Beautiful.
Thank you. So, and that is the piece of mine that will be on the concert tomorrow. It starts out very soft, but
Right.
definitely gets a bit more energetic towards the end.
Well, the acoustics in Crosstown and it's
Yeah.
going to be...
It's a magical
Have
place.
y'all got
I cannot wait.
rehearse yet? Didn't hear the sound there yet?
Well, we were here for the first iteration
Okay.
of this festival
Last
last
year.
year.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we were in the Crosstown space before it was fully complete.
Right.
And I mean, what an amazing space
It
for a
is.
concert.
Yeah.
It is. Well, let's talk about all the things that are going on. I know that tomorrow night at 7 o'clock in the central atrium at Crosstown, that's when Blue Shift is performing your pieces. That is free and open to the public. Another thank you, Crosstown Arts, for bringing all kinds of cool things to Memphis. And then to really dig into this, I'm very excited that on Saturday we get a chance to have an extended version of this, if you will. I've got a couple lectures here, getting medieval ancient techniques in the radio music head. Alex,
in the
tell us
music
about
of
that.
Radiohead.
Radiohead. So, there we go.
So,
Yeah, spoonerism.
As I mentioned earlier, a big interest of mine is cross-pollination between genres.
Yes.
And I think Radiohead is one artist that's really pursuing that, moving from popular music and incorporating elements of classical music in a way that's really integrated. And so I'm going to take apart one of their songs, it's Pyramid Song from 2001, and show how the techniques that they use in that song can be traced all the way back to the 14th century,
Okay.
but how they've changed them so that they sound completely unique and contemporary.
Fascinating. 14th century. It's after medieval modes. Is this what kind of realm are we getting into there?
Oh no, I don't want to give too much away.
Okay.
Because, but one technique that Radiohead uses in that song is what's called an isorhythm, which is a patterning of rhythmic durations and melodic notes.
Okay.
That pattern may or may not be the same length. And the more disparate the length of the pattern is, the more complexity arises.
Sure.
And so Radiohead uses an updated version of that technique in
Brilliant.
the song, and it's not that much different from what composers like KWAM were using in the 1300s.
Oh.
It's really extraordinary.
Well, and secondly, that's at 1 o'clock, and this is, again, in Crosstown Concourse, second floor, that beautiful performance stair, which is a great venue for a lecture or performance. Then at 2 o'clock, our second one is So You Don't Like New Music, a suggestive way to listen to contemporary classical music. And Derek is doing that one?
Yes, our colleague Derek Cooper, who is in rehearsal right now and sadly could not be here in the studio, is going to be talking about different ways of listening to contemporary music and why you shouldn't be intimidated.
Right.
And there's no wrong way to do it, basically. Not to give away the main thesis of his presentation.
Again, it's an extended version of this. The idea that it's an experience. I may not go out humming the tune, but I will have experienced, hopefully, something really cool and wonderful.
And you get to try it out tomorrow night. Come to the concert and try your own strategy.
Right.
And it's casual. Like, don't be freaked out that it's some kind of high art classical thing. Come hang out. It's fun.
There's a bar.
Yes. Okay.
That's what I meant.
And then on Friday, you're going to U of M to do some master classes.
That's correct. We're going to be teaching in the afternoon at the University of Memphis Summer Choir Camp, and we're really excited about that.
That's awesome.
We taught the composition elective during the camp last year, and we had an amazing time. Really dedicated, talented students. So we're excited to be back.
And this is part one. We'll see some of you again in August 18th, some more Iceberg.
So the half of us are here right now.
Okay.
Half of the 10 are here, and the remaining 5 will be here in August, working with Blue Shift during the Continuum Music Festival on August 18th.
Fantastic.
So
Thank you all
do
for
you
being
guys
here.
scout out all the restaurants for the other group? Is that the way it works?
Basically, yeah.
Good.
We're so full.
We're the scouts.
We'll give you some tips. Well, I'm having a great show. We're looking forward to it, and we'll pump it again tomorrow and the next day. So we'll keep mentioning it and try to get as many folks out as possibly can. I think it's fascinating.
It is. Absolutely. We're very fortunate to have something like this here. I'm thrilled.
In fact, it makes my show almost sound like NPR.
We like that, too.
We've taken it up a level here.
Well, let me take it down a notch or two. A couple